Standing tall and proud in the center was Theseus, the hero of Athens. Clad in a gleaming Athenian helmet and armor, he held his spear and shield with a warrior's confidence. Behind him, his father, King Aegeus, along with Perigune and their servants, watched with solemn faces, their hopes pinned on their champion. Across the garden stood his opponent, GLAUCUS of Crete. His posture was one of pure arrogance. He was dressed in Cretan armor, holding a sleek spear and shield, his gaze fixed on Theseus with cold disdain. Forming a wide circle around the two combatants were Menestius and other Athenian nobles. Their expressions were carefully neutral, a calculated look that seemed to say, "I'll side with whoever wins this." Just beyond the palace walls, a massive crowd of citizens had gathered, their voices echoing into the garden. "Long live Theseus, hero of Athens," they chanted. For a brief moment, Theseus turned, giving the crowd a grateful nod before his focus returned to the man before him. The two warriors began to circle each other slowly. The only sound was the soft crunch of their footsteps on the ground, a quiet prelude to the storm. Suddenly, their eyes locked, each searching for a flicker of weakness in the other. In that instant, GLAUCUS moved like lightning. He hurled his spear with incredible speed, aiming to end the duel before it truly began. The spear cut through the air with a vicious whistle, flying straight for Theseus. But the Athenian hero was ready. With perfect timing, he raised his shield, deflecting the projectile with a loud clang that resonated through the garden. The moment the Cretan spear was turned aside, Theseus seized the opportunity. He charged forward, his own spear aimed true. GLAUCUS, now on the defensive, tried to block the ferocious attack with his shield, but the sheer force of Theseus's strike was overwhelming. The impact sent GLAUCUS's shield flying from his grasp, leaving him completely disarmed and vulnerable. Theseus didn't hesitate. He saw the opening and pressed his advantage. The tip of his spear became a silver blur as he thrust towards GLAUCUS's chest. In a desperate move, GLAUCUS grabbed the shaft of the spear with his bare hands, trying to hold it back. His muscles strained, but he was no match for the hero's power. Theseus drove the spear forward, and it found its mark. GLAUCUS cried out as the spear pierced his upper body, and he collapsed to the ground. Defeated, a wave of thunderous cheers erupted from the garden and the city beyond. King Aegeus Perigune and every citizen roared in celebration of their hero's victory. Long live Theseus, guardian of Athens! Their voices unified in a powerful chorus, but as the cheers rang out, a mysterious figure rushed to the fallen GLAUCUS. It was Medea, her face completely hidden by a mask. She quickly pressed a small vial of medicine into his hand. GLAUCUS, though bleeding and weakened, managed to swallow the strange liquid. Theseus turned to Perigune, his expression softening, but his resolve unshaken. "You will not be taken to Crete," he promised her. "But I cannot break the pact between Athens and Crete. I will go in your place. I will face the Minotaur and break this chain of sorrow myself." His words ignited the crowd once more. "Conquer Crete, Theseus," they roared. But then the impossible happened. Glaucus, who had been on the verge of death, began to stir. He slowly rose to his feet. The deep, fatal wound in his neck was gone, vanished without a trace. The pained look on his face was replaced by an even more intense, arrogant energy. "The fight is not over yet," he bellowed. He drew a sword from his belt and lunged at a stunned Theseus. Theseus barely managed to block the attack with his shield, but the powerful blow shattered it into pieces. He tried to counter with his spear, but Glaucus caught the shaft in his bare hands and, with a roar, snapped it in two. A wave of shock and tension swept through the onlookers. The nobles and generals murmured amongst themselves. Now unarmed, Theseus was forced back by Glaucus's relentless sword attacks, retreating toward the circle of nobles. It was then that the sly Menestius whispered, just loud enough for those around him to hear, "If Athens' heir cannot protect one woman, perhaps his right to the throne should be reconsidered." Theseus glanced back, but Menestius had already melted back into the crowd, watching the fight with a detached amusement. His jaw set, Theseus drew his own sword. The clash of steel against steel rang through the garden, brilliant sparks flying with each strike. It became a brutal dance of death. Wounds opened on both men, but Theseus endured through sheer force of will, while Glaucus, aided by his mysterious medicine and incredible regenerative power, simply ignored his injuries. After a long and punishing exchange, they broke apart, breathing heavily, each searching for an opening for the final blow. That moment came. With a synchronized cry, they lunged at each other. Their swords met in a final cataclysmic crash, and both blades shattered simultaneously. Now both were weaponless. Without a moment's pause, they threw themselves at each other bare-handed. Theseus locked his hands around Glaucus's throat, and Glaucus did the same to him. It was a primal, desperate struggle for survival, each man trying to choke the life out of the other. Their strength began to fail, their vision tunneled, and their lungs burned for air. Finally, their grips loosened, and they collapsed to the ground in a heap, utterly exhausted. A dead silence fell over the garden. Everyone, generals, nobles, and citizens, turned their eyes to King Aegeus. But what could he do? With both men collapsing at the same time, it was impossible to declare a winner. Stepping forward into the silence, Menestius's voice cut through the air. "This fight is a draw. Everyone here is a witness. Theseus did not win. No one could argue the point." Glaucus's men approached, their leader now stirring. "Since it is a draw," one of them said coldly, "Perigune must come with us to Crete, as was agreed." The crowd roared in protest. King Aegeus, holding back his fury, gave the only answer he could. "Very well. She will be counted as one of the 7 maidens sent as tribute. However, if Theseus kills the Minotaur, she must be returned to Athens, unharmed." Glaucus's men accepted the terms. The remaining tributes were chosen by lot, and the Cretan ship began preparations to depart. A few hours later, Glaucus, having somewhat recovered from his ordeal, boarded the ship with his men. The arrogant confidence had returned to his eyes. Theseus and Perigune, their own wounds not yet healed, also boarded, their hearts heavy with dread. They were now fated to sail with their enemy. The ship's anchor was raised, and the massive Cretan vessel slowly pulled away from the port of Athens. On the shore, the citizens waved farewell, tears streaming down their faces, their voices carrying one last, desperate plea across the water. Theseus, defeat the Minotaur. Hero of Athens, please come back to us.